Pain is a simple word, but the feeling isn't simple at all. It's a sharp warning. A dull ache, a signal that something is wrong. We all know it. It's a basic part of being alive, of having a body that can be damaged. We complain about stubbed toes and headaches. We fear the pain of a broken bone or a serious illness. It shapes our lives, our decisions, our memories. But what about them? What about the Neanderthals? They were our cousins, not our ancestors. A different kind of human who walked the earth for hundreds of thousands of years. They lived through ice ages, they hunted mammoths with wooden spears, they survived in a world that was far harder and more dangerous than ours. We see them in museum dioramas, hunched and hairy, and we imagine them as brutish and tough, unfeeling almost. We think a life that hard must have required a different relationship with pain. Maybe they just didn't feel it the same way we do. Maybe they could shrug off injuries that would leave us helpless. It's a tempting idea. It makes them seem more alien, more suited to their prehistoric world. It fits the old stereotype of the dumb caveman. For a long time, that was the prevailing view. But science has a way of chipping away at old ideas, replacing them with something more complex, more interesting, and often more human. The question of Neanderthal pain is no different. The answer, it turns out, is hidden in a place no one thought to look until recently. It's not just in their fossilized bones, it's in our own DNA. And the answer is not what you'd expect. To understand Neanderthals, you have to first forget the cartoon version. For over a century, we got them wrong. The first full skeleton they found was of an old man, stooped with arthritis. So, scientists drew all Neanderthals as stooped. They saw the heavy brow ridge and the large nose and decided they were unintelligent. Ape-like. They were seen as a failed experiment in humanity, a dead end that our own clever ancestors, Homo sapiens, easily pushed aside. Well, but every new discovery has forced us to revise that picture. Their brains were as large as ours, sometimes larger. They were not clumsy brutes. They were expert toolmakers. Their stone spear points and hand axes were skillfully crafted, showing forethought and a deep understanding of their materials. They were apex predators working in groups to take down massive animals. That requires communication, planning, and social cohesion. They had culture, they controlled fire, which gave them warmth, protection, and cooked food. They likely wore animal hides to survive the cold. They may have adorned themselves with feathers and shells. They buried their dead, sometimes with care, which suggests they understood loss. They may have had a form of language. The old image of a grunting caveman is gone, replaced by a picture of a complex and capable people. And we know they were tough. Their skeletons tell a story of a hard life. We find fossil after fossil with healed fractures. Broken arms, ribs, legs. A Neanderthal skeleton found in a cave in Iraq at a site called Shanidar is a famous example. This man, called Shanidar I, lived to be around 40 or 50 years old, which was a ripe old age back then. His life was a catalog of injuries. He had a crushing blow to the side of his head when he was young that would have damaged his brain and likely blinded him in one eye. His right arm was withered and had been amputated or snapped off above the elbow. He had a badly broken foot and arthritis in his joints. He was, by any measure, severely disabled. He couldn't have hunted effectively. He would have walked with a painful limp. Yet, he lived for decades with these injuries. This tells us two things. First, he was incredibly resilient. He endured immense pain and trauma and kept going. Second, and maybe more importantly, someone must have been helping him. His group didn't abandon him because he was injured. They cared for him. They fed him. They protected him. This is evidence of compassion, of empathy. It's a profoundly human trait. So the bones show us they endured pain, but they don't tell us what that pain felt like. Did Shanidar I survive because his body just registered damage differently? Was the signal from his crushed foot a dull throb when for us it would be a screaming agony? For a long time, this question was purely philosophical. We could never know what was going on inside a Neanderthal's head. Then came the genetic revolution. In the late 1990s, scientists managed to extract tiny fragments of DNA from Neanderthal bones. It was a monumental achievement. Over the next 2 decades, the technology got better and better. Eventually, they pieced together the entire Neanderthal genome, an instruction book for a person who has been extinct for 40,000 years. This changed everything. Now we could compare their genes directly to ours. As we could see the differences and the similarities, we learned that modern humans and Neanderthals had interbred. Most people today with ancestry outside of Africa carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA. Their genes didn't vanish, they live on in us. And this is where the story of pain gets truly interesting. Scientists can now scan the Neanderthal genome for specific genes whose function we understand in modern humans. One group of researchers decided to look at genes related to the nervous system, specifically genes that control how we feel physical sensations, including pain. They focused on a particular gene that codes for something called a sodium channel. That sounds technical, but the idea is simple. Think of your nerve cells as long electrical wires. They carry signals from your body to your brain. When you touch something hot, a signal zips along your nerves to your brain, which then shouts, "Pain, move your hand." For that electrical signal to travel, your nerve cells need little gates that can open and close. These gates are the sodium channels. When a gate opens, sodium ions rush into the cell, creating a spark of electricity that travels down the nerve. How easily these gates open determines how sensitive the nerve is. If the gates are hard to open, you need a very strong stimulus to get a signal going. If they open at the slightest touch, your nerves are on high alert. There's one specific sodium channel called Nav1.7 that is known as the master controller of pain. It's found in the pain-sensing nerves at the edges of our body, in our skin, and organs. The gene that builds this channel is called SCN9A. The function of this channel is so important that small changes to it can have dramatic effects. People born with a broken version of this gene, one that makes a channel that won't open at all, feel no pain. They can break a bone or walk on hot coals and feel nothing. It sounds like a superpower, but it's incredibly dangerous. Pain is a vital warning system. Without it, people with this condition often die young from injuries and infections they never noticed. On the other end of the spectrum, people with mutations that make the NAV1.7 channel too easy to open are in constant, excruciating pain. The slightest touch can feel like being burned. Their pain gates are stuck open. So, this NAV1.7 channel is the biological volume knob for pain. What did the Neanderthal version look like? When scientists looked at the Neanderthal genome, they found something fascinating. Neanderthals had a unique version of the gene for this pain channel. It had 3 small differences compared to the typical modern human version. 3 little changes in the genetic code. This was a clue, but it wasn't proof. A genetic difference doesn't automatically mean a functional difference. The researchers needed to test it. They couldn't, of course, test it on a living Neanderthal, so they did the next best thing. They used modern lab techniques. They took the Neanderthal gene variant and put it into cells in a petri dish. They used frog eggs, which are a common tool in this kind of research because they can be easily manipulated to produce proteins from foreign genes. They grew cells that were producing the Neanderthal pain channel. Then they ran experiments. They used tiny electrodes to measure how much electrical current was needed to make these Neanderthal channels open. They compared them to cells making the typical modern human channel. The results were clear. The Neanderthal version was different. It was what scientists call hyperexcitable. It was leakier. It was easier to open. This meant the nerves containing this channel would fire off a pain signal more readily. The volume knob wasn't turned down. It was turned up. The conclusion was stunning, and it completely flipped the old assumption on its head. The genetic evidence didn't suggest Neanderthals felt less pain. It suggested that, at least for some things, they felt more pain. Their pain threshold was likely lower than the average modern humans. A stimulus that might be mildly annoying to us could have been genuinely painful for a Neanderthal with this gene variant. This discovery was so counterintuitive. It didn't fit the picture of the tough, hardened survivor of the Ice Age. Why on earth would evolution select for a trait that makes you more sensitive to pain, especially in such a brutal environment? This is where we have to think like an evolutionary biologist. Traits don't evolve because they are good or bad, in a simple sense. They evolve because they provide some kind of survival or reproductive advantage in a specific environment. So, what could be the advantage of a lower pain threshold? The most obvious answer is that pain is a good thing. It's a protective mechanism. Feeling pain tells you to stop doing something that's damaging your body. It's an alarm system. And a more sensitive alarm system might be better. Imagine a Neanderthal hunting in the cold. A small, unnoticed cut on their foot could easily get infected. An infection in a world without antibiotics was often a death sentence. But if their pain system was highly tuned, they would feel that small cut immediately and intensely. That pain would force them to pay attention, to clean the wound, to protect it. Think about frostbite. In the freezing climates they inhabited, frostbite was a constant threat. A more sensitive pain system might give you an earlier, stronger warning that your fingers or toes are getting dangerously cold, prompting you to seek shelter or warmth before permanent damage is done. In this light, heightened pain sensitivity isn't a weakness. It's a high-fidelity survival tool. It's an early warning system that is finely calibrated to a dangerous world. There's another possibility too. Genes often have more than one job. A gene that influences one trait might have other unseen effects on the body. This is called pleiotropy. It's possible that the primary evolutionary advantage of this Neanderthal gene variant had nothing to do with pain. Maybe it affected some other aspect of their physiology in a beneficial way, and the increased pain sensitivity was just an unavoidable side effect. Yeah, we don't know what that other effect might have been, but it's a real possibility. Evolution is messy. It's full of trade-offs. There's also a third option: it might not have been an advantage at all. Sometimes genetic traits can become common in a population purely by chance. This is called genetic drift. Neanderthals lived in small, relatively isolated groups. In such small populations, random fluctuations can cause a gene to become widespread, even if it offers no benefit or is even slightly detrimental. Maybe this pain gene variant just happened to pop up and spread by chance. We can't know for sure which of these explanations is correct. But the idea of a hyper-vigilant alarm system makes a lot of sense in the context of a Neanderthal's life. The story doesn't end 40,000 years ago. It continues today inside many of us. Because of that ancient interbreeding, the Neanderthal version of the N817 pain channel didn't disappear. It was passed down through the generations and is present in the modern human population. This gives scientists an incredible opportunity. They can now study the effects of this gene in living people. A large study in the United Kingdom called the UK Biobank has collected genetic data and health information from hundreds of thousands of volunteers. The researchers were able to search this massive database. They identified people who carry the Neanderthal pain gene variant and looked at their health records. They asked a simple question: do these people report pain differently from people who have the more common human version of the gene? The answer was a clear yes. The people who carried the 3 Neanderthal mutations reported experiencing more pain in their lives. And they were more likely to see a doctor for pain-related issues. When asked to rate their pain on a scale, their scores were consistently higher. This was the modern-day confirmation of the lab experiments. The Neanderthal gene variant really does seem to lower the pain threshold. It makes people more sensitive. Today, this gene variant is most common in people with European and Native American ancestry, which makes sense given the geographic range of Neanderthals. It's very rare in people with ancestry purely from Africa, because Neanderthals and the ancestors of modern Africans never met and interbred. The legacy of these ancient encounters is written in our nervous systems. So, what does this all mean for our picture of Neanderthals? It means we have to throw out the last remnants of the unfeeling brute stereotype. They weren't numb to the world. In some ways, their experience of the physical world might have been more intense, more vivid, and more painful than ours. Think again about Shanidar 1, the old, injured man. His survival is even more remarkable now. He wasn't just toughing it out with a dulled sense of pain, he was likely enduring a level of chronic pain that we would find debilitating. His survival becomes an even greater testament to his personal fortitude and, crucially, to the compassion of his group. They cared for someone who was in constant, significant pain. This paints a picture of a society with a deep capacity for empathy. They understood suffering because they felt it so keenly themselves. This genetic discovery also changes how we think about the relationship between physical and emotional experience. Pain is never just a physical signal. It's processed by the brain, it's colored by emotion, by memory, by social context. A Neanderthal who felt a sharp pain from a cut wasn't just a machine reacting to a stimulus. They were a conscious being having an unpleasant experience. They likely felt fear, anxiety, and distress just as we do. This shared biology of pain connects us to them in a fundamental way. When you read about this gene, you realize you could be carrying it. Your own sensitivity to pain might be, in a very real way, a gift from your Neanderthal ancestors. It's a humbling thought. They are not some alien other. They are part of our story, part of our biology. Of course, we need to be careful not to oversimplify. Not all Neanderthals would have had this specific gene variant. Just like in modern humans, there was genetic diversity. Some might have had it, others not. And this single gene is not the whole story of pain. Pain perception is incredibly complex, influenced by dozens of genes, by our upbringing, by our mental state, by our culture. We can't say all Neanderthals felt more pain. What we can say is that a genetic trait that seems to increase pain sensitivity was present in their population, and it was likely common enough to be passed down to us. The journey to understand Neanderthal pain is a perfect example of how science works. We started with a simple biased assumption based on how they looked. Then archaeological evidence from their bones and tools made us question that assumption. Finally, genetic data gave us a direct molecular insight that turned the old idea completely upside down. They were not less sensitive than us. They may well have been more so. They lived in a world of constant physical danger, and their bodies responded by evolving a nervous system that was on high alert. They survived not by being numb, but perhaps by being exquisitely aware of their bodies and their environment. Their toughness wasn't a lack of feeling, it was the ability to endure feeling, to keep going despite the pain. And their humanity wasn't diminished by their hard lives, it was expressed in their ability to care for one another, to ease the suffering they knew so well. The question, did Neanderthals feel pain differently, seems simple. The answer is yes, they probably did. But not in the way we used to think. They weren't numb, they were tuned in. And in that heightened sensitivity, we find a deeper, more complex, and far more relatable picture of who these ancient relatives of ours really were. They were people who felt the world in all its beauty and all its pain just as we do. Maybe even more so.